Good afternoon and welcome to another Giant Step IG Live. Coming to you actually at slightly earlier time today. To be joined by Arthur Baker today, the legendary DJ and producer. We're going to be talking about his career and also talking a little bit about Miami, where he's been residing for the last few years, and also the Winter Music Conference, which would normally be happening in Miami at the moment. Wanted to also let you guys know, if you haven't already visited the Giant Step website, we have a vault there, giantstep.net/vault, and we have a lot of archival photographs and posters and music, and there in videos, and there's also a in there a few pictures from the Winter Music years that Giant Step's been involved with. So check that out. Arthur is about to join us. And there he is.
Here I am.
Hi, Arthur.
Hey, man. How are you?
I'm good. How was the boat?
The boat was great. I was on with your friend Ollie.
Yeah. That's
Jez,
Ollie.
Also, Jez Collins also.
Oh, Jez from Los Angeles? Is he in town? Nice.
Well,
nice.
he was on the boat.
So he must be in town.
He's in town.
Quite a reunion. So that's Ollie Buckwell of Dorado Records, who now resides in Miami, and Jez Collin, who lives in Los Angeles, who used to be in the band Soul Sonics and is also a music producer too.
Yeah. So which I never knew that, considering I had seen the group's name Soul Sonic, considering Sonic Force. But he said it was sort of it was a bit of an honor to Soul Sonic Force.
Right. Well, yeah. Arthur, thank you for joining us. No today want to talk about you and your career, because you've spanned a number of decades and
many decades, man. I'm like,
I was being polite.
Literally, shockingly, I'm in my fifth fucking decade. It's pretty.
Wow. Of being in the music business.
Pretty crazy. I started in the 70s and we're in 2020,
Well, let's start there then. So you were born in Boston, Massachusetts, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And growing up there, so obviously that was sort of the sort of how old were you when you first sort of like really became aware of music as a passion for you?
Well, I mean, in the '60s, I remember seeing the Beatles on it. I mean, and
really
the Stones, and
wow.
Then Motown and Stax and Oates Redding, all that. I mean, '60s music was like such a classic time to be hearing music and becoming aware of music.
So right? when you saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, you must have been pretty young.
I was like 4 years old.
4 years old. So was that the first time you'd ever heard the Beatles, or you were aware of them in some way?
Well, that was the first time. Basically they were on the radio. I mean, it's sort of hard. I had heard them. We'd be driving in our car and hear music on the radio. That's pretty much where you would hear music back then, would be driving with my family on the radio, and little transistor radios. So I might have had one a few years after that. I probably had my first transistor around when I was 8 or 9 or something, and to use it to listen to baseball games and basketball games and listen to music. So, yeah.
So I presume growing up in Boston, listening to baseball, you were a big Yankees fan then, I presume, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. No, the Dodgers. Yeah, we obviously had great sports. I spent a lot of time with my dad and my mother in the Red Sox and Celtics and Patriots games. So I grew up with a really a big background in sports and actually going to games, and my dad was a big sports fan, but they were also music fans, my parents, and they were in. My dad was a huge Nat King Cole fan. He met King Cole when he was young. He was like working for a florist delivering flowers, and he got sent to deliver. He had a shipment that went to wherever Nat King Cole was playing. So he actually got to meet Nat King Cole when he was very young.
Wow.
And my mom was into Frank Sinatra. So, I mean, we did have music that we listened to at home, and musicals, and, you know, like Fiddler on the Roof and shit, like all the things that were happening in the 60s. And you know, I started really getting aware of music, loved rock and roll, but I also love soul music. And as I said, I was into Motown, I was into Stax, Oates Redding, Aretha, The Temptations, Isaac Hayes. So I grew up listening to Jackson 5. I grew up listening to R&B and rock and roll. You know,
so there was an R&B.
So
there was an R&B station in Boston that you would listen to.
There was an R&B station in Boston called WILD, which was a daytime station, only daytime. And years later, I became the program director, a guy by the name of Sonny Joe White. He was pretty famous program director. He was like Boston's Frankie Crocker, actually. He was like that vibe. Yeah. And we also had a radio station called BCN, which was a great alternative radio station. And Peter Wolf was a DJ on there for a while. Joe McEwen was a DJ on there for a while.
Well, hold on. We should just Peter Wolf. Peter Wolf from the band.
Peter Wolf from
Jay Giles, and Joe McEwen, who went on to work at Warner Brothers in A&R. Is that the same Joe McEwen?
Well, he was at Warner. He was at Columbia.
Right.
I mean, we became really good friends. He got me my gigs remixing Bruce Springsteen years later. So, but Boston had a great music scene and a great club scene live. There was Paul's Mall, Jazz Workshop, the Sugar Shack. So for live gigs like soul and jazz, you know, I mean, I saw Return to Forever. I saw Chick Corea and Roy Ayers and Horace Silver and Muddy Waters, and all in like a small club setting, which was Bob Whalers and their first gig, Little Feat. So Boston would get Jazz Workshop, Paul's Mall. You would get like bands like that playing in front of two people. So it was a great musical education. And what was great about BCN was it also it played all sorts of music. It played rock, but it also played soul. And for instance, the first time I heard Joe Simon, Drowning in the Sea of Love, I heard that on BCN. A lot of Philly stuff at that, Gamble and Huff, all that. So, you know, late 60s, early 70s. I mean, I was really to be in that city because I got to see Led Zeppelin, the Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, all right.
Wait. Slow down a little bit here. So you saw Hendrix.
We don't have that much time.
I know, but you're dropping some major sort of names. I mean, you know, me being a lot younger than you. Yeah, me being a lot younger than you. I know
Miles Davis with Miles Davis with Chick Corea and I think and Herbie Hancock.
And Herbie. So you saw the Bitches Brutal. You saw the good shit there.
At Harvard Stadium, and who opened up for that? I mean, it was just mental at that time. You would just see all these acts, and it was, you know, right around the time of right before Woodstock, I guess, time. And yeah, they were great. I got to see these acts like Hendrix and Joplin, and Duane Allman, who was my favorite. I guess the Allman Brothers with Duane, and you know, got lucky enough to see them right before they all passed away. I mean, it was shocking. For a kid to really be a fan of that music, and you were losing your idols, like, you know, at that time, so many people died. It was just insane, you know.
And so we're talking.
It was hard.
The end of the 60s into the early 70s then. 70s. You
passed away, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So who was in Hendrix's band when you saw him? Do you remember?
It was Buddy
Buddy Miles.
Miles,
So it's the band of
and
Gypsies.
it was a band of gypsies. Yeah.
Wow, heavy. Okay.
Yeah, in the Boston Garden. Yeah, it was great. They were great. It was a great gig. I saw the first gig I ever went to was Led Zeppelin and MC5, and that was '69, and
Wow.
that was insane. I mean, the first live band I saw, like professional live band, was MC5.
Wow.
They opened up for Zeppelin. And
Wow.
then the Stones came around, and it was the Stones with B.B. King and Ike and Tina Turner and Terry Reid. I mean, those were the kind of gigs you'd get to go see, you know.
Right, and the Stones were very famous for putting on artists who, introducing those artists to a whole new audience. I mean, they had Prince once
Yeah,
open up for them, Bob
they
Marley, Stevie
they loved
Wonder.
you know,
Yeah,
obviously they were schooled in
yeah,
black music, so
yeah.
they would always put people who they really respected, and I saw them 2 years later when they came back in town. I saw them. Stevie Wonder opened up
Yeah.
for them, and that was that famous gig when they got arrested in Rhode Island, and Stevie Wonder had to come back on and do a whole other set, and the Stones didn't go on till like 1 o'clock. That was in 70, I think 71. That gig.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
So you were immersing yourself in seeing live music. You were listening to the radio.
Yeah.
You were getting into all this stuff. How did you start? Did you start DJing first, or did you start production?
I started DJing, and I started DJing in college, and I went to Hampshire College, which was in Amherst, right near UMass, and it was very close to New York. It was like a 2-hour ride, or not even that. And I went to New York, and my daughter just walked in, so say hello.
Hello.
Okay, now let me continue. You can sit and listen. So I went to New York.
She's probably heard these stories before.
No, she hasn't. Some of them. I went to Brooklyn, and I went to GLI, and I bought a mixer. So I bought one of the first DJ portable mixer, GLI, and I also went and I got a synthesizer. I got a synthesizer called the Kitten, and this is when I was in Hampshire College, and basically I took a class there, an electronic music class. So we had one of the few. This was 74. We had probably the first electronic music studio in a college, I would guess, and we had an ARP, and we had all these amazing synths, and so I started DJing, and I got a gig at a club called Rashid's, which was like the only disco in Amherst. And I started DJing, and I would go to New York on the weekends and pick up records at Downstairs Music in the subway on 43rd Street. So I started doing this like 73, 74. A lot of my friends were in New York, lived in New York, or were from New York. So we'd all go down on the weekends and do that,
And were you going to any clubs in New York?
I was able to meet people like David Todd, who was head of RCA disco promotion, and he was a DJ and a remixer. So literally, I sort of hooked in with him. And in Boston, after I left Hampshire, I went back to Boston, and I met up with a guy named John Luongo, who was a DJ and a remix. He started becoming a remixer. So at that point, I decided I wanted to make my own records, because I knew I wasn't going to be like a world-class DJ, because I wasn't good. And then when I didn't like the reaction, I just tossed the records at the crowd, smash them and throw them at the crowd. So I would do that, and basically, so I started taking an engineering course at a studio called Intermedia, which is where Aerosmith had cut their first album. So I started doing the class there, and I talked the owner into paying for me to produce a disco record. So this is like 76 or 7, I guess. And I was working in a record shop during the day, and I had infrequent DJ gigs at clubs, like a club called Sadie's, like all these mafia discos in the 70s. You know, it was like a place called Chateau de Ville, which was a dinner club owned by the mafia. And they had a club in there called Sadie's, so, you know, basically I was doing all this stuff, and I talked this guy into giving me studio time and paying for musicians. And I cut a record called Losing You. And because I was working in a record shop, I was importing disco records myself personally from Canada. So basically I had a side hustle selling disco records out of a record shop called Discount Records. And through that connection, I met a guy named Pat DeSerio, who had a label called Disco One in Montreal. He put out the first Cerrone record. He did Quebec Electric. He had a lot of early disco records, and he signed this record for me. He paid me like $500, I think, and it came out, and it got charted on some DJs played in London, and not in London, in New York, and John Luongo did a remix on it, and that sort of started the ball rolling. And after that, I just started doing more recording, and you know, I did a group called North End Kind of Life, which was on West End Records, and then I did a record called Happy Days, Tease Happy, which still gets played a lot by North End and Michelle Wallace. And I did some music that Tom Moulton ended up buying from me and putting out as TJM. So I got, you know, I went from, you know, like a pretty nothing DJ to hustling my way into the business in New York, to making some records that actually got played. And then I moved to New York, and like in 1980, I moved down to New York. And then, you know, still hustling. But in New York, you know, basically I had to start from the beginning again, as far as like musicians and connections, and obviously a record producer. Back then, if you didn't have money, you needed money to make a record. Yeah. You needed to go in you couldn't sit at your computer, so you needed money. Yeah. I had met Tom Silverman at some disco conventions in New York earlier, like in the late 70s, and he was starting a label called Tommy Boy, and I was probably the only one of the, we were friends, and I was a producer, so he said, "You want to let me introduce you to this guy, Afrika Bambaata. He's got all these rap groups." I had heard about rap through Joe Bataan. I had made a record with Joe Bataan that never came out, but he had exposed me to rap, and he had said, "Come up to the Bronx with me. You're going to see something crazy." And we went up, and there were guys with boom boxes rapping over breaks, you know. And I'll never forget, Joe said, "Someone's going to make $1 million out of this." I mean, obviously he underestimated. But he saw. He obviously knew. He was the first person I ever knew who actually hit me to rap and to said it was going to be a big deal. And then he made Rappo Clappo, which definitely didn't make $1 million for him, unfortunately. But then Tom called me, so I met with Bam, and we went in with the Jazzy 5, and we cut Jazzy Sensation, which ended up selling enough and getting enough radio play on BLS and KISS and KTU to keep Tommy Boy afloat. And then Bam had another group called Soul Sonic Force, and basically the rest is history. We went in on that, and we made Planet Rock, and then it all blew up, you know.
And whose idea was it to use the Kraftwerk sample in that?
Well, the thing was, Tom and Bam had the idea to use numbers. Not numbers. Trans Europe Express. So they had the idea to use that, and they did this demo, which we've actually found recently. I've rediscovered the demo, and it was very down tempo. But I used to hang out in Brooklyn Music Factory, which these two brothers, Donnie and Dwight, ran the Music Factory, and they would DJ at the shop, and they would play me stuff. And when I put out Jazzy Sensation, I brought it by, and you know, I'd go there every Saturday and hang out and just check out what they'd play. And they played me numbers, and I said, "Oh shit, man, that is the beat we should use." So I went back, and when we went in the studio, we got a drum machine. We rented we found a drum machine in the Village Voice, and it was a man with drum machine. And basically, the guy came in, showed up with a Roland, and I either played him numbers or we had it on a tape or whatever, but we had him program numbers pretty much, with a different sound, obviously, because Kraftwerk didn't use an 808. And we did that, and then I did some cowbells and shit on it. But basically, so we had to make that tempo work, and the rappers had learned their rhymes over a slower beat, more like Trans-Europe Express tempo. So that first night, we couldn't actually lay the rap down. They had to go back and relearn the rap to the new track. And that's the, that is the true story, that Globe had to go back and take the beat with him and refine his rap. And so it was a collaboration. I mean, I definitely, doing Trans-Europe Express was their idea, and doing numbers was my idea. So that was definitely how it happened, and the rappers hated it. They thought it was too fast. They wanted something like Jazzy Sensation, on which we had sort of redone Funky Sensation, Gwen McCrae, but it was like a down-tempo version of it. So they were really, they thought that they never make another record again. And I was really confident about it. I thought we had made, even before the rap went on, I thought we had changed musical history. I mean, personally.
And you did. And and that was, it was a global hit. I don't know whether it was a smash, because as far as just, it was such a new genre, but
it was very influential, and it really made a difference. And in America, it went gold. In America, it sold over 500,000 12-inch records. So it's one of those things. Its reach was stronger than its sales in other places.
Absolutely.
Like for instance,
influence as well.
In the UK, the next record I did was "Walking on Sunshine" by Rockers Revenge. That went silver. That sold over 300,000 in the UK, which Planet Rock definitely didn't. And that went to number 4 in the pop chart in the UK, which Planet Rock definitely didn't. But the reach of Planet Rock internationally, obviously, it was very strong. And it's interesting because I'm working on Beat. We've optioned the rights to Beat Street as a musical, and we're working on that now. Me and Michael Holman. And the issue with that was it had much of a bigger influence and reach than it did in the box office. So, pretty much anyone you ever talk to who is a breakdancer or even rapper anywhere in the world, you mention Beat Street, and they're going to say that's where they first saw breakdance. So basically, the movie did shit. I mean, it did much better when it on video. It did amazing, But basically, its influence far outreaches its original sales, and the same with Planet Rock. Although Planet Rock did sell really well in the U.S. and worldwide, I'm sure it sold 1 million copies, but it just didn't over time, of course. But so it was obviously a super influential record.
So we're talking about what, 1983 now?
82,
83. And so how did you then how did you connect with New Order?
They connected with me because I had done Planet Rock and I had done Walking on Sunshine, both which were very big club records. And I had a friend named Michael Schamberg who was in New York, and he ran Factory New York. They had a sort of a pseudo office, not really. Out of his apartment. So he called New Order and said, "You should meet Arthur, and you guys should go in the studio and work together." So we did, and they came in, and they were there for a gig, and they came in for a few days, and I took them out to Brooklyn to Fred Czar's house. He had a pre-production studio, and we started working on ideas, and then we went back in and we cut Confusion, and we cut the rough track of Thieves Like Us, which they ended up finishing in the UK. They ended up finishing it in the UK.
And the video, which is it's an iconic video that you're in, Arthur. We've got to talk a little bit about that. Was that shot way after, or was that kind of shot at the same time that they were in town?
No, that was shot in June, right before the record came out, of July. It was really hot because I remember we, basically I had my car there because we were going to go out to the Hamptons. Jelly Bean, myself, John Roby, and at the time Jelly Bean was living with Madonna and Tina B. We were all going to go to the Hamptons after we finished the video because we would do that. We'd drive out there at like fucking 5 a.m. off our faces, which we were we were lucky we made it because sometimes I mean I was so coked up at that point. I guess I would just I just pointed myself in that direction and made it there. But basically that video was done, and then New Order also, it was all done in one night, and they went to Paradise Garage. I mean, they may have played at Paradise Garage that night. I'm not even sure. As I said, I was a bit out of it in those days. But
the club in the video is
Funhouse.
The Funhouse, right?
Yeah, but then
and that was an actual.
You see New Order walking up and down stairs and on.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was at Paradise Garage because New Order never played at the Funhouse. I think they played at the Garage. But that, I mean, they've remastered and re-affected the video, and it's out now again, and it looks fucking amazing. They spend quite a bit of money remastering the video visually, and now the video it looks like a whole new video because I mean all these years you've only seen it on YouTube or MTV or whatever. Now it's sort of a lot. I look even better than I did then.
Yeah, and if my memory serves me right, you're handing Jelly Bean a reel-to-reel modern asset.
Which we used to do. I mean that literally they got the idea for the video just from following me around and following us around, and it really was exactly how I would take a cab. I would go to the Funhouse. I'd bring him the thing, and I'd look around and watch a reaction. So that video was literally that was my life, my weekends, and the story of one of the girls who would go to the club, that whole thing. I don't know who wrote that. I don't know if it was Stephen Hager, who actually wrote Beat Street, wrote the document of the film Beat Street. He had written an article called "Looking for the Bugging on a Perfect Groove," an article for the Village Voice, which became his impetus to do Beat Street. And I think there was one of the people featured was this girl who worked in a pizzeria or whatever. But I think it had to do with that for sure.
And somebody has just Ricardo Fernandez, thank you, has just confirmed that New Order played the Paradise Garage on July the 7th, 1983.
That's
wow.
The day
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you.
Yeah, and they probably came from the garage over to the Funhouse when you see them walking in. I'm sure that was the day. Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, this is incredible stuff. And what about, how did you meet Freeez? Because IOU, we can't talk to you without IOU.
Okay, Freeez, like, they fucking haunted me. They were like sending me tapes. No, they did. They were like, they wanted to work with me, and I was super busy. And as I said, I was doing a lot of drugs and wasn't really paying attention. I had started my own record label. And one day, these like four young English guys come in, and they're like there. They've shown up. They've flown over without me even like fucking committing to doing the record. And they had sent me all these demos, and New Order sent me demos. I didn't even listen to any demos because I wanted to write I thought when I produce records, I want to be part of the band. So I'm going to write the songs with the groups, which I'm glad I did, because now at least I'm still getting paid on writing and publishing, after all these years. But the bottom line is they came in, and at the same time I was working on Looking for the Perfect Beat, Confusion, and IOU. Those were all being made around the same time. And, so I felt bad for Freeez that they had come over. So I said, fuck it, I'll do the record. And they were on Beggar's Banquet, which was, an up-and-coming label. And we did a whole album, and the guys on Rockers Revenge sang on a bit of it. And, it was coming out good. And then I had an idea for a track, and I had this instrumental, and it was more electro than the rest of the album. and I was coming over to the studio. I was working at Unique in New York, and I was driving cross town. I think I had gone to Sun Lee, Kim Kun Lee, a Chinese restaurant right on 6th Avenue. I'll never forget. We're having Shun Lee. Okay, Shun Lee. So I'm having lunch at Shun Lee, and then I get in a cab. I'm going cross town. I'm stuck in traffic, and I'm listening. I have a cassette player. I always had a cassette player with me, and listening to the track. And I came up with the chorus for IOU. And then we went in and we started working on the vocal, and Tina, my ex-wife, she sang on the backgrounds, and John Roby and John Rocca. And then we still didn't have that synth line, the da-da-da-da-da. And Roby put that on. And then me, Jellybean, and Roby were in the studio, and Jellybean said, oh, because we had just got the first emulator. And Jellybean said, oh, can you sample the vocal? And we could do like a solo with AEIOU, which, basically we did it and it worked, and that was it. And then we did the remix, and that was the record. And that obviously was a pretty big hit. And Martin Mills from Beggars has told me, when I moved to London, we became friends, and he said, without IOU, Beggars might have gone under, because that was the hit that kept them going. And then they had the Southern Death Cult album, which was their next one, which did really well. But he said without IOU, they probably wouldn't have been able to continue, go on with the label.
Wow.
So if you know the history of Beggars after that, what they've had,
absolutely.
They went from Adele to the Prodigy to, whoever, but,
Wow.
So, so Shun Lee. Yeah, Tina's just gone on. Shun Lee.
Wow. So then, basically after that, you were like, you kind of hit the big time. And so you're working.
The thing was, I never got any gigs from any major labels as a producer at all. Basically I was a producer making my own records. And then when they heard my own records, they said, do you want to remix our artists? So I was able to get remixes off the fact that I was having these hit dance records. So Cyndi Lauper was probably, Girls Just Want to Have Fun was probably the first one I did for a major. And then I did some Springsteen stuff, and,
Fleetwood Mac.
Fleetwood Mac was a little bit later, I think Girls Just Want to Have Fun would have been 83, 84. And then Cover Me and Dancing in the Dark would have been like 84, 85. And then Fleetwood Mac was probably 87. So, basically I did that stuff, and I had my own studio. And then I had Beat Street was 85. And then,
was Harry Belafonte?
Yeah, he was like the producer, executive producer of the film. And then he was co-executive producer of the soundtrack, so there was that. And then, so I went from there, and then I did, through that, I did Dylan. I did a Dylan album, Empire Burlesque.
How was that working with Bob Dylan?
That was amazing. That was great. I mean, it was sort of I had been a Dylan fan in high school. So when Joe McEwen called me up and said, this was after Springsteen, you want to go hear Dylan, I was like obviously I was a bit nervous, because, I was a huge Dylan fan, and Dylan's a little bit more, I wouldn't say distant, but, when I met Springsteen, he's like a regular dude. He was younger, and Dylan was like a bit strange. And I met him, and he played me all these cassettes in a hotel room, and basically he sort of tried to he wanted me to like say what I do. He played me like 15 tracks. What will you do? I said, well, I take one of those tracks and listen a couple of times, and then I'll tell you what I would do. I'm not gonna I'd listen more. That's what I said. I'd listen to one of them a few more times. And he was like, oh, okay. So it was great. I mean, it was great to work with him, and I think my main high point on that was he had it was a lot of stuff I didn't cut any of the the tracks were all cut. It was more like me going in and finishing stuff. So I was sort of limited to what I could do, but I could finish stuff. And then it was the end of the album, and I said, Bob, I think you should just do a track where it's you, acoustic guitar, harmonica, like your old, like the old stuff, man. I mean, people want to hear that, that's what you should do. So then the next day he came in and he did this track, and it was amazing, because he just went in, and I had never heard the track, and he played it down a couple of times, and we recorded it, and it was a song called Dark Eyes. So it was amazing, and it was like the last song of the album, amazing. So then, like 20 years later or whatever, whenever that was, when he put his book out, I bought his book. I bought the book as a fan, right, a Dylan fan. Never, not expecting to be in the book, because basically Empire Burlesque was a footnote in his career and not very successful. And, I bought it as a fan, and I'm reading, and he starts talking, and I'm like, shit. And then he tells this story about how I had told him that he should do a ballad or an unplugged acoustic track. And he went back that night and wrote a new song. And that was like the first time he had ever played the song when we recorded it, fully. And I was shocked because, obviously Dylan had so many songs, like he had thousands of songs, and, he had actually gone back and written a song. And he made a big point of that. Was the only time in his career he had ever sort of responded to a producer and done something like that.
Wow,
So
that's amazing.
I was totally blown away by it. And the song is an amazing song. And he did a version with Patti Smith live that's insane. That's really beautiful. But it's, if that album, if that was the only thing that came out of the album, I think it was worth it, because it is. Song's called Dark Eyes. You guys should definitely check it out.
So talking about sort of like working with your heroes, a big project that you did in the 70s in the 80s was the Sun City Project, because that had like the who's who of music who basically came together. It was kind of like the We Are the World anti-apartheid album in a way.
But actually the cool We Are the World.
Very, yes, absolutely. No question about that. But like Miles Davis was on it, Gil Scott-Heron.
It was insane. I mean, to have been able to literally work with all those artists, like, it was nuts. And it was probably the high point of my career, definitely. Because also be able to make a fucking difference, because we literally, people didn't know about apartheid. We got that shit on MTV. We got the making of on MTV. It was amazing. And how that happened was basically I'll make the story quick. Basically, I had met Steve Van Zandt.
Little Stevie, yeah.
Strangely enough, through Jimmy Iovine, who I knew. And this is when Jimmy Iovine was an engineer. And he said, you should meet Steve. So me and Steve met, and we started writing some songs.
Was he already in the E Street Band then, Steve?
He produced. Yeah. He had produced he was one of the producers on the album Born in the USA. So basically, me and Steve were writing songs, and we wrote a song for Jonathan Demme movie, and we with Jimmy Cliff. And we were friends, and we were writing something, stuff. And I went into, this is interesting story. I was mixing something with Good Enough for Cyndi Lauper, and Cyndi Lauper started talking about South Africa, and she started talking about South Africa and how Good Enough, her song Good Enough, was something to do with it. And I didn't really ever see that, but she, so we're talking about it. And I had South African family, which I remember when I was a kid had come to visit us, and my dad had thrown them out because they were so racist. They were just, so we had family. So when she started talking about South Africa and apartheid, I was like, man, we should do something about this. We should educate people. So I called Steve, because for some reason Steve and I were writing, and I knew how political he was. And I said, man, we should do a record about apartheid, anti-apartheid. And he said, man, I already wrote it. I got a demo. I go, what? He said,
wow.
Yeah, I wrote it like last week. And I go, are you fucking shitting me? So he comes over to my studio to Shakedown. He plays it for me. And I'm going, man, this is fucking amazing. I go, let's put some more singers on. So I got Will Downing and BJ Nelson and a bunch of my Bettina B and Lottie Gold, a lot of the background singers. So we have like a real chorus and Will saying some of the verse and stuff. So then we go, okay, let's make a fucking, let's do it. I have a recording studio. We know everybody. Let's start doing it. So Steve said, let's do Artists United Against Apartheid. He wanted it rockers and rappers united against apartheid. So we would go to that Sunset Diner, which you probably know on 57th Street, because we both lived on 57th. And we'd go there and we'd make our sort of wish list of artists. And I'd let him take the list away, and he'd always lose it, and we'd have to start over. But I was like, man, we got to get this one and that. He wanted to do like 4 rappers and 4 rockers. I said, Steve, you got to think bigger. We got to do it we got to make it like fucking huge. So then we just started, and obviously we got pretty much everyone we wanted to get. And all along we're like, I'm like, Steve, are you going to get Bruce to work on it? Because most of the recording was being done at my studio. So like Miles Davis shows up without, he buzzes on the door. Yeah, man, let me up. I'm like, who's this? Miles, man, let me up, man. So Miles shows up, and we were trying to get Peter Gabriel because he had written the song Biko.
Yeah.
And Steven was really influenced by Biko, the song. So then we got Peter. Yeah, he was working on his album at Power Station, and one day he just shows up on his own, and I'm there. Steve's not there, just me and Peter and my engineer, and we did Ramone, Lou Reed, Ray Barretto. I mean, the people on it, it's just like insane. Bono. So what we did was
Gil Scott-Heron,
Big Youth. I mean, come on, Jimmy Cliff, Dylan, fucking Jackson Brown. I mean, Peter. I mean, it was just nuts. So basically, Eddie Kendrick and David Ruffin. So basically, then when Miles came in, he played all the way through the track, and we had this amazing Miles track. So somehow, I don't know who hooked. I can't say who really hooked it up, but Herbie came in and he played on it, right? I don't even know who hooked that up for us. Maybe Danny Schechter, who was one of our partners, who's unfortunately passed away years ago. But whoever it was, then we said, oh, shit, we should put together a Miles Davis group to play under Miles' trumpet part. So we get Ron Carter and Tony Williams and Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock to go
you got the quartet.
And play. And that's on the album. So that's on the album. And we have, there's a Silver and Gold by U2. That's on the album. It was amazing. It was amazing. And it was incredible.
Incredible.
And then the fact that, we raised a lot of money, which went to the Africa Fund. We did a great making of documentary, which MTV put out. And it was pretty much the first rap music that was on MTV, the intro when Graham Melly Mel and Soul Sonic and were on the beginning. Yeah. So I think it's in the top 5 of my favorite things I've been involved with.
So we don't have a lot of time, but you did mention Shakedown Studios, and I just want you to mention you had a very famous intern at Shakedown.
Well, I had a few. I actually had many interns at Shakedown, but the most Adam Yoke, I would guess, from the Beasties. He was an intern there, and we used to. He was a great kid, and this was obviously in the early days of the Beasties, and a funny story. Adam used to get around town on a skateboard. All the Beasties did. And I used to purchase stuff from Chung King's studio, which wasn't legal. And basically, I mean, these are all stories that could, who cares now, right? So basically, I'd be doing a remix for Sony or Columbia, whatever, and I would supposedly run out of half-inch tape. So I would charge them for 2 reels of half-inch, and Adam would go down to Chungking, supposedly to pick up two half-inch tapes and come back with with an empty box with cocaine, which obviously he would definitely dip into for sure. But he'd go on the skateboard, and I was just, they were great days, as they say.
Didn't he pilfer a sampler from you once, or?
Well, no, Rick took my 808, and then
Rick
Rubin borrowed my 808, and then he claimed he left it in a cab, and then which he paid me. He paid me for the 808, but obviously
probably from the royalties of the records that he made with it.
But you know what? If it had been the 808 I had cut Planet Rock on, I wouldn't have lent it to him,
Right.
But it wasn't, so
right.
It didn't really matter to me, But
so I mean, we these are amazing stories, but I do want to sort of like move a little
into
bit
Miami. I assume.
Move a little bit into Miami. So you've been living in Miami for, I mean, what, like, lost track of time, like 10 years, 15 years?
Well, I bought an apartment here in like 92, right? So basically, I've had a place here off and on for many, many, many years. But literally, I sold it in 2001, right after the. Put it this way: I came to Miami for a winter music conference. I had just done a remix for New Order, 1963 and Let's Go, 2 tracks. So whenever those came out, that's when I bought my first apartment, because I used the money that I got for the remixes and bought an apartment here. They were really cheap, and I bought an apartment. So I was here, and I'd come to winter music every year when winter music was, very much house. Well, it was I guess it was house and disco, and I would, and I would come every year, and met the most amazing people. One year I came and I was filming for Doc, and the tapes went missing, and it's just a fucking horrible story. But so basically, I've been doing that for years, and then so I'd come pretty much every year, and then in 2003, I had been doing these parties in London called Return to New York. So in 2003, I did a party which actually I think changed the course of music and winter music, because I did a party which I brought down LCD Sound System, The Rapture, Too Many DJs, Peaches. So I brought down the new electro here, and I did a Return to New York party with Fader. They were the co-sponsors, and we did a party at a place called the Soho Lounge, which is in what is now Wynwood.
Yeah,
this was
remember
2003,
the Soho Lounge, yeah.
And literally that was, things were starting to bubble here, as far as like there was a promoters called Pop Life and my friend Aramis and stuff. They were doing it, but this was like, we brought like the new acts, and that sort of blew it up, and that's sort of what launched that whole electro and LCD and the Rapture and all that. And then the next year we did a party at the Shore Club, and if you look at the list of acts, right at the bottom is DJ Diplo, and that was the first time he played in Miami, and obviously now he's the fucking king of Miami. And Milo was on that gig, and then the next year we did one with New Order. So basically, that was sort of the heyday of me as a promoter for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I did these amazing parties.
Because really before then, it really was a very house disco orientated.
Totally. We definitely those parties definitely changed the environment here, and it was new music. There was that sort of. There was a lot of new music coming out, like Milo, The Pressure, that came out.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of the electro clash, but, Calvin Harris, Girls, that came out around then. So it was all around that time that all this music started happening. So yeah, I've always, I mean, I love Miami. I came down here as a kid with my family. My grandmother lived in the Tides Hotel. She used to live there in the winter. And my father lived here and you know, many years. So, you know, Miami it always was a third home for me, you know, because London, New York, and Miami were always sort of home bases. I feel pretty much equally. But now, obviously, Miami is my home. You know, I'm not
Right.
going anywhere.
So how I mean, so it's now 2 years without a winter music conference. I mean, Miami's
Yeah, I
pretty
mean,
open though, right? As far it
it's
seems.
open. Well, space is open. They're doing parties and shit. I mean, there's a few small festivals going to be happening in April and May, I think, you know. Nothing really big now, but I mean, 1-800-Lucky, like tonight, Oscar and my friend Laz, they're DJing there. It's outdoor. I don't know, you know, space is sort of an outdoor terracey type place. But yeah, you can, you know, I guess in America, it's the most open club-wise, you know. It is the most open. I mean, I would say that, you know, by the end of, I'd say May, June, July, there'll be stuff. And I know 3 Points is going to be in October. But, you know, no one really wants to do a really big event. You can't really do a big event. But you can do, you know, a couple of hundred, I guess. I don't know what space lets in. But, yeah, I mean, I know I just got an email from Damian Lazarus, who has been doing one of the best parties, Get Lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I played for him 3 years ago with Rockers Revenge, and which set me off on my journey of making the film on Rockers and the album. But he's doing something. He's going to do something virtual, and he just asked me to play a 90-minute set. I think so. That's
Great.
probably going to be happening. But I mean, his party was a great. He had the best party as far as I was concerned. Get Lost was really. Get Lost is very much like what we were doing with the Return to New York vibe, you know. So.
Right. Yeah, and you know, as we're running out of time a little bit, so I wanted to. You mentioned Rocker's Revenge and the movie.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about this project because it's been quite a journey. And
yeah. So basically, God, in 2015, so that's like 6 years ago, 2014, Dwight Fuller, who is one of the founders of Rockers Revenge, called me up and said, you know, I'd love to do some music with you. And, you know, he sent me a few things and I wasn't blown away, but, you know, I listened. And then I had a track called On a Mission that I had written. I'd written the chorus, I had written the track. And I thought, oh, this might be really good for him to finish. So he did. And his brother Donnie sang on it, and Tina and Adrian, who were the other members of the group, sang on it. So I have this thing, a rough version, and I go, shit, I think Damian Lazarus would love this track. Because I had written the music and the track in Ibiza after having gone to DC-10. It was very much like Benediction, that whole vibe, that Jamie Jones and Damian and all those guys. So it was that vibe. So I sent it to him, and he was like, yo, who is this? I love it. So I told him it was Rockers, and he had been a big fan of Walking on Sunshine. So we work on it, and then we get it, and he puts it out as his 200th release on Crosstown. And then he goes, listen, do you think the guys would want to do a live gig at Get Lost? So we did a gig, and it went well. And, you know, then I started thinking, oh, you know, let's make some more music and let's do more gigs. And it just sort of went on this journey of doing a film on the journey and making an album. And there's a few things in it that, you know, illness and things that have happened over the course of the last 3 years. But it's going to be a very cool movie. And now I'm working with Pulse Films on it out of the UK. And what's great about it is the album and the movie will come out in 2022, which will be 40 years since Walking on Sunshine. Wow. So I think that will make it very much apropos and special, and, you know.
And one of the last concerts I went to before lockdown was actually in Miami when New Order were doing, I think, 4 nights at the Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, so basically,
and they were open.
I got New Order to book. I was meant to be the opening act for all 4 nights, and Andy Robinson, from the manager of the group, I called him and I said, "Listen, you think Rockers could open up?" And they, they agreed to let Rockers open up, and we filmed it, and so that's part of the movie. But obviously after that, COVID happened, because we thought things were going to go flying after that gig, and they really didn't, and a bunch of things happened after that. But that's to be seen when the movie comes out. I don't want to go too into it, but basically it's the journey of 5 friends who are all in their 60s and making music and trying to do some things that we missed out on doing the first time. So, but it's very cool. I think it's very inspirational, and it's a great story. So it will definitely be out for 2022. That'll definitely be when it will come out, and it makes perfect sense because it's 40 years. It gives it a few hooks, I think.
So before we close, is there anything else that you want to mention or talk about? Anything else you're working on? Or
no, I mean, really that's been what I've been working on. We have an album that's done, and there'll be a single out this summer. It looks like we'll be doing gigs in London in November, Rockers and myself. And God, what else am I doing? No, I'm making a lot of music. I always talk about it online. It looks like I'm going to be doing something with Red Hot, the Red Hot label compilation project. Mm-hmm. So I've got a few projects with them, with Bill Coleman. So that's happening. Yeah, I'm always putting music out, and I get some interesting stuff out. I do a lot of stuff with Made in Miami, which is Oscar G's label. Mm-hmm. I have a track called Mi Mente, which came out early in this end of last year on Through Nervous. And also, yeah, one last thing, I did an EP with my friend Jose Parla, the artist, great
amazing
artist.
And
we've done an EP, on a political EP with through the Wide Awakes thing that he's involved with, and he hasn't been that well, so send out good vibes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm making music, man. I make music every day. My daughter Amaroni is she's writing songs already, so hopefully I'll get her a publishing deal soon.
Yeah, I was going to say, sign her to get a publishing. Yeah.
But it's all good. As I said, I'm going to be doing a live gig on with this Get Lost thing, which is going to be in April. I don't even know if it's been announced, so don't tell Damien I said anything. But
you heard it first here. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, the music is coming. I mean, the project. I did a track with Watch the Duck, with the guys from Watch the Duck, which is Jimmy. I did it with Jimmy Douglas. He did the mix on it, and
wow.
Yeah, I'm doing a couple of TV. I got something going on called the Sound Masters, which is going to be a doc, sort of a series on music makers, and also there's a compilation with Demon, a series. So I've got plenty of shit going on.
Right.
I mean, I've been working my ass off. And as I said, the Beat Street thing, which is going to be like a 5-year project for sure. So
brilliant. Well, we've run out of time, but Arthur, thank you so much.
No problem.
You're a legend. It was great hearing these stories. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you.
Stay safe, and we'll see you really soon. And have a great weekend, everyone.
All right, you too.
Thanks so much for joining. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.